So the first thing I'll talk about here is really kind of an exciting world right now, and that's taxes. Now the excitement isn't anything that anyone actually enjoys, but there has been a lot of change in taxes. Now when we look at estate planning, estate tax is really the thing that comes to mind. And it's something that we have to look at and plan for, because the problem with estate tax is that if there's any owed or due once someone passes away, that has to be paid in cash 9 months after death to settle an estate. My clients that I work with are, for the most part, asset rich and cash poor. If a big bill starts coming up, if a tax bill has to be paid or anything like that, the only way to pay that bill is to sell off business assets in order to make that the bill go away. And I like to use that word business succession. It means more than just transferring the business. It means that we're transferring the business with the opportunity for it to succeed in the next generation. And most people, the businesses that they built have these different working parts that one relies upon the next to support it on an ongoing basis. So the second that you have to start parting out the business and selling off pieces of it is the time that you're going to affect how that business can continue to survive as the future goes on. So this is a big thing we need to plan for. And here's the reason why. So here's the background on estate taxes. And hopefully this kind of sets the stage to let you know about the change and how really big this change was. Now when we look at estate tax, we're talking about estate tax exemption, the amount that you can pass free from tax. And so the way that the laws used to be is we had this old fallback law. This old fallback law provided that you could only, at your death, you could only exclude $1 million of your assets from tax. Anything above that would be taxed at 55%. So for instance, if I died in a year where this law was in place, and I had $2 million to my own name, at my death, $1 million of that $2 million would be excluded, not taxed. But that extra $1 million would be subject to a 55% tax, leaving a $550,000 tax bill that they would have to come up with to settle my estate. So this was the fallback. This is what was in the background here for taxes for quite some time. Now in 2000, when George W. Bush ran for president, one of his platforms was he wanted to do away with the federal estate tax altogether. So once he took office, they started negotiating and putting together a law. And they had to do a lot of horse trading in that. Now at that time, the federal estate tax was about a $22 to $25 billion revenue stream for the federal government. And so they couldn't just turn the faucet off all at once, because they would have had to offset, and it would have just been too painful for them, I guess. And so what they did is they put a tax law in place that would work for 10 years. And little by little, over that 10-year time, they were going to turn that faucet off just a fraction each year. And for 1 year and 1 year only, they completely turned that faucet off. And so for 2010, there was no federal estate tax. But the problem with this whole tax scheme that they had set up was it wasn't permanent. From the get-go, it was only around for 10 years. That was all. So after that 10th year, we were in the year 2010. We didn't know what was going to happen in 2011. We had this background law coming back with that $1 million exemption, 55% tax rate. We didn't know. And so what they did really let us in on their process that they're going to go through now all the time. They wait until the last second to do anything. They waited until December 17th, right? So 2 weeks before 2011 was to begin, they gave us a new tax law. So this tax law was put in place after these reforms were done. This tax law was slapped on there, and it was more or less a Band-Aid. Once again, it was a temporary relief. It provided for tax relief for the year 2011 and 2012, but that was it. So once 2013 came around, January 1st, well, the old Bush-era tax reforms, well, they weren't around anymore. This 2-year Band-Aid, that wasn't around anymore. This is what we were faced with. And there were a lot of people that did a lot of rash things at the end of last year because they thought the sky was going to fall. They really believed that we had a $1 million exemption coming down the pipe. Well, in actuality, we did kind of have a $1 million exemption, but it was only for a few hours. So on January 1st, they passed the tax law. And what was so monumental about it is that they did away with these old tax laws. They threw them out the window. So now we don't have this old baseline, $1 million exemption, 55% thing looming in the background anymore. That's great. What they replaced it with is a new fallback, a new permanent tax law. This new permanent tax law provides for a $5 million exemption per person with a 40% tax rate above that. Now that $5 million figure is indexed for inflation, and so now that's adjusted up to $5.25 million per person if you were to pass away today. Now that's great. It gives us a little something to hang our hat on. But at the end of the day, what does permanent mean when you're talking about politics? Maybe not a lot. But so permanent just means that if the same people are in office are going to vote the same way, it'll be around. But this is something that is great. There's really no reason anymore to put off planning and waiting for a permanent law. We have them. But we still have to keep our eye on the ball. What they're deciding to do all the time now is crisis politics. They wait till the car accident happens, and then they try to pick up the pieces afterwards. Whereas, arguably, what they should try to do is avoid it altogether, but that's just the way they decided to run the show. Here's another one. March 27th. Debt ceiling. What's going to happen? We'll probably figure that out on March 26th at about 11:50, 11:55, maybe, something like that. And it's yet to be seen what they're going to do. Here's what I suggest that they do, and I really hope that they do it sometime. I really hope they overhaul the federal tax code. And the reason is it's pretty big. Anyone want to wager a guess on how many pages they think the tax code is? It's kind of fun. Come on, please. Someone say something.
1,500.
1,500.
80,000.
80,000. Wow. That's pretty close. You just thought you were pulling a number out of thin air. Pretty close. And you know what? By now, it might be at 80,000. See, 73,608 pages. That's a lot. I don't know what that is, the thickness of that, but I do know if you line it up end over end, that's about 13 miles in distance, which I'm going to really feel here. My wife wants me to run a half marathon with her, so I'll be thinking about that tax code as I run it. It's ridiculous. 73,000 pages. There's so many different things and loopholes and everything that are in there. It's just such a big, huge monstrosity that we need to get rid of. But in order to do that, we're going to have compromise. We're going to have people make some politically, suicidal decisions. But it needs to be done because that is completely unmanageable. 73,000.